So this is the A Plus manual that I have, study guide. It's got about 1,500 pages in it. And what I usually do is I go through each chapter, and what I do is, as you can see up here, there's a note, and then you'll see something marked in yellow. And what I do is I try to do different colors and stuff like that. If it's got a note, I usually try to keep it the same color and everything. I'll use green. Anything italic, any kind of italic words or anything like that, I highlight them in yellow. I go through the whole book, and this is how I do it. Any kind of really important stuff that is mentioned in here, what I do is I highlight that in blue, and I'll go through stuff like this, breaking it down and stuff like that. Anything that I see that's important and stuff like that. Exam tips that I see, I highlight them in pink, and I go through that. And like I said, I go through. Sometimes I'll find something and I'll mark it in a pen and stuff like that when CompTIA is mentioned and stuff like that, what they expect you to be competent on with the exams. I'll go ahead and highlight that in there, and I'll go through, and here's another one that's got that exam tip. And like I said, I just spend, when I get my book, what I do is I just go through, and this is how I mark everything. And then what I go back to do is the things that are highlighted. Let's go to like exam tips. What I'll do is I'll go through the book and I'll write down every exam tip in a notebook, and I'll mark on there exam tips, and I'll write down the page and the chapter that it's on. And I'll go through the same thing with the note. If I have notes that are marked in there, I'll go through and I'll write them in a separate notebook, and I'll mark that, and I'll go through the same thing, and I go through the whole chapter just doing this kind of thing, checking things out. And sometimes if I come across a important stuff and everything like that, I'll write it in the front of the book. I'll make a note of it, what it is, the page number, and I'll highlight it in the book itself as what I've got on here and stuff like that. And then another thing that I do is when I come to the end of the chapter, this is a little bit of cheating, but when I come to the end of the chapter, I'll write down all the questions. What I'll do is I'll go to the end, I'll circle the answers, and then what I'll try to do is I'll go through the chapter, and like I have on here, page 9 of where this particular thing is, and I'll mark it here, and I'll go to the chapter, and I'll mark it in there, I'll highlight it with a pen or something like that, and mark it. And what I do is I'll go through, and I'll write all the questions down, and the answers, and I'll write them in a separate notebook, and I'll go on through different chapters and stuff, and mark all that stuff. And what I do back here is at the very end of the book, I don't want to spill my coffee. It's Friday night here after 8 o'clock. It's almost 8:30 here, and I got my coffee going. I got to get up early tomorrow, and I got to read this whole book now that I can relax a bit. But see, you still have more. I'm on page 1191, and I've got a note. I've got this that I've got. Sometimes there's stuff like this that cautioned and stuff like that, and warnings and stuff, but not so much. I really don't make a note of them too much, but I'll highlight them if I come across it. But I don't rewrite them because there are not too many of them in the book itself. So, and then back here you got the glossary and stuff like that, all the terms and stuff like that. And I still haven't gotten back to here to go through these and mark all these off and stuff like that. But as you can see, this is just something that works for me that I go through. And sometimes I'll come back here to the actual index, and I'll usually highlight stuff that I really want to remember later and stuff. And sometimes I haven't gone through it on this book or nothing like that, but I used to go through here, and just as you can see here, certain things I'll highlight and stuff like that that are on here that I really want to be particularly memorized for and stuff like that, and just get to know stuff and where they're at and all that kind of stuff, and just go through here and just make a note of certain things and stuff and go through the whole book and do all that. But that's what I do. It helps me, and hopefully this is something that maybe you haven't come across or haven't done or anything like that, but this is something that works for me. Like I said, here we are in the front of the book that I go. This is the book that I use right here for A+. I have his Security Plus book too, and like I said, I go in the front of the book here, and I mention anything that's on here, the page number, where it's at, and stuff like that, and I go through. And sometimes Sometimes what I try to do too, but I find I can't really make a max up on these things or anything like that, is what I do is I take the CompTIA objectives and I try to match them up with the chapters and the pages and stuff like that. Like here, chapter 1 will be 1002 because there's 1001, 1002. One is basically meant on software, the other one's on hardware. And I try to match them up. So, but as you can see here, part of this chapter is 1001, 1002. So it doesn't really work out that way. Sometimes you'll have the whole chapter where it'll be one over the other one, but it kind of jumps around. It becomes too much jumping around and stuff like that to go through here. Like here you have all 1002, 1001, and stuff like that, where the whole chapter is. But like here, chapter 11, you have part of 1001, then you have 1002, and it goes back, and it kind of jumps around all over. Here's 1001, 1001, and stuff. I used to do that with the objectives, but I don't do that no more. It's just too time consuming and stuff like that. But just to rephrase on this video, you know, that's what I do here. I go through here and I do this. I italicize, as you can see in yellow, any kind of these italicized words. I'll make them in yellow and stuff like that, and we just go from there. Here's another thing, given a scenario. Here's a one of the objectives and stuff like that you need to know, and I make a note of that in pen, and this way when I go through I know what I got and stuff like that. So hopefully this is something that can help you. Maybe this is something that you can use, and maybe this type of thing will work for you. I've never seen it done on anything of my. This is something that I've come up with that works for me, and it's something that I've not seen. I don't look at a lot of videos on YouTube for exam tips or anything like that, because everybody does their own thing. Everything works for their own, and the biggest thing is to study and to get as much study material as you can, watching videos and so forth, and doing all that, trying to get hands-on stuff. But this is something that I came up with myself that works for me, and I usually stick with it. So have a great weekend. Let me enjoy my coffee and try to relax the rest of the night. Try to stay up late. Maybe get some reading done. I have a Security Plus book too, so maybe I'll go through that tomorrow and do a little bit of that, of what I come through in that book. That's a smaller book, and we'll see where we go.